As you can probably imagine, there's a huge number of system requirements that your operating system must be able to do in order to implement and use everything we're going to be talking about in this course. I'm just kidding. Actually, your CSS requires very few system requirements. There's basically two things you're going to need. One is a text editor. Now, I will be using the text editor that shipped with my operating system, which is Notepad. However, if you're using a different operating system, feel free to use whatever text editor you want. Now, the key is that this text editor needs to be a plain text editor, meaning that whenever you save your file, it's not going to add on a lot of code to keep formatting and things like that, because you don't want the formatting. So things like Microsoft Word or OpenOffice.org's Writer program are not going to be appropriate for these purposes. So if you're using Linux, you can use either Kate or gedit or any text editor that you want. If you're using the Mac operating system, you can use TextEdit or any other text editor that you're familiar with. Now, if you do have a WYSIWYG application, you can feel free to use that as well. However, please just use the code editing section of that WYSIWYG editor so that you're going to be able to follow along and not have to deal with the specific implementation of CSS inside of that application. Because of the scope of this course, we are focused on how to create CSS independently of any specific tool. If you're interested in how to use CSS with a specific tool, there may be a video course here on VTC that meets your needs. But as I mentioned, for this course, I will not be using any WYSIWYG application. I am going to be using Notepad. The next point here is that no matter what operating system you're using, you should be just fine using that operating system. Because our web technologies and CSS are operating system agnostic. The only thing that matters is if that operating system has the capabilities to run one of these modern standards compliant web browsers. Now, these web browsers I'm talking about are Safari, Internet Explorer 7 and above, and Firefox. I do recommend that you have all three of these browsers available to you in a production environment so that you can go in and test to see how each one of these browsers work with your specific designs. Because each browser is different, you are going to see differences in how they display, and we will get into that more in an upcoming movie. Now, I will be using Firefox for this entire course. And the reason I'm doing this is for simplicity's sake. If I were to include testing my designs inside of Safari and Internet Explorer, that could easily end up turning into its own course because the differences between these browsers sometimes are quite complex, although it's getting a lot better. Now, I do encourage you to use whatever browser you want. Just know that there may be some slight differences between how my browser is displaying something and how your browser will be displaying something. Now, as we advance and become more and more standards compliant with all of our different web browsers, the differences are going to be minimal. So just kind of keep that in mind. So as you can see here, the system requirements for this course are not many. All you're going to need is a plain text editor and a modern standards compliant web browser.